Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, AI-powered supply chains, data outside of four walls, sponsored by Genpact. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. On the left-hand side of your screen is the Q&A. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can type your question into the Q&A box and submit your questions to our speakers. All questions will be saved, so if you don't get an answer, we may follow up with you via email. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the yellow Help widget. Here you can find answers to common questions. A copy of today's slide deck will be available to download from the resource list widget. Towards the end of today's presentation, we'll ask for your feedback. A survey will pop open on your screen and will only take a minute to complete. Your feedback is extremely helpful. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available about 1 day after the event and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier today. I'd like to turn over the event to our moderator today, Chuck Martin, founder of NetFuture Institute. Chuck?
Thank you very much, Holly, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome our extremely talented list of speakers today. And I'm going to actually ask them to introduce themselves, and then we will get going into the program. Tom?
Hello, everybody. My name is Tom de Groot. I'm the Global Head of Commercial Supply Chain Operations at Bose.
Terrific. And Bill?
Hello, I'm happy to be here. This is Bill Chase. I am the Director of Global Supply Chain Planning at Bose. I'm responsible for the overall demand and supply planning work globally.
Terrific. Bradley?
Hi, everybody. Brad Shimon here. I'm the Chief Analyst for AI Platforms, Analytics, and Data Management at Omdia. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And Amaresh?
Hi, Chuck. Great to be here. I'm Amresh Tripathi. I run the analytics business for Genpact, which is everything from master data to a lot of our data insights work to all of our AI ML capabilities.
Great. What a terrific group of talent. Thank you all for being here. By way of background, I'm Chuck Martin. Among other things, I write for AI Business, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, or I certainly hope you are. I'm also the author of numerous business books. My latest is Digital Transformation 3.0, and where we looked at really a lot of what's happening in the AI and IoT worlds. In terms of what's happening in the market today, if you look at the size of AI, AI investments are really off the charts. $100 billion being spent by the National Science Foundation for 5 AI research institutes. The U.S. government is investing $1 billion in AI and quantum information science. $2 billion AI-based software and financial services in 2020. That's this year. By 2025, we're looking at $9 billion spending just in financial services alone. So this is serious money. If you look at the scope of this, just the scope of the entire market, we're looking at revenue growth. One second here. We're looking at revenue growth of robotics revenue. Robotics revenue alone is $60 billion last year. In 2026, we're looking at revenue of $286 billion. This is being driven by advances in AI, machine vision, machine learning. And in terms of companies, 75% of organizations scaling automation expect to outperform the competition in revenue growth within 3 years. So we're talking about serious growth. It's kind of that hockey stick sort of straight up sort of thing. In terms of understanding what's going on, the 70% of business leaders understand how AI is going to change their organization in terms of generating business value. So organizations are starting to really understand this. 87% of organizations expect AI to give them a competitive advantage, and 71% of businesses are confident that AI will deliver positive results in the next 12 to 24 months. So there's a lot of upside here, and companies are starting to actually see it. In terms of the impact on customers, businesses are requiring new analytic tools and metrics to mine and leverage new data sources, and you're going to hear a lot about new data sources today. 5G is going to change everything. It is coming. It's not as fast as someone would like, but it is coming in a very big way. And supply chains are tapping sensor-generated information, new information sources like never before, and the results are cost savings and new revenue. We're going to talk about all of that today. In terms of today's agenda, we're going to have a spectacular analyst presentation, which I know you will enjoy. Very, very useful for everybody. Fireside chat. You're going to hear about a lot of the AI innovation going on at Bose, and everyone is familiar with Bose, I'm sure, a phenomenal company. And then we're going to have a panel discussion where we're going to have a lot of expertise where we're going to talk about a wide range of subjects in supply chain, and then we're going to have an audience Q&A. So during this whole presentation, there's a place to ask questions. Please, as Holly mentioned, type your questions in. We will get to as many questions. We have plenty of time for questions at the end, and we will be dealing with all of that as we go. So welcome, everyone, and now get set for learning quite a lot. And I'm going to turn this over to Bradley.
Thanks very much, Chuck, and hello, everyone. It's good to meet you today. It's my pleasure to speak to you about AI in the supply chain and how data from outside your organization can actually make the difference between basic modernization and true digital transformation. That's the plan. Here is your copyright and disclaimer notice. I hope you enjoyed that as much as me. Here is my agenda. This is what I'd like to talk about today. And I'm going to begin by speaking about the acceleration of digital transformation that's been brought upon by the COVID-19 pandemic. What other place is there to start? I'm going to then talk a little bit about spending on AI, digging into a little bit of what Chuck went over, and talk about how AI is being used in the supply chain. I'll then dive a little bit into demand planning and how AI can help make better decisions there. And then lastly, I'm going to introduce the concept of external data or more data. More data is always better in driving those business decisions and improving them. All right. So as I mentioned, the best place to start is in talking about the situation we all find ourselves in, which is we are faced with a global pandemic that is likely going to continue disrupting our business activities and our personal lives well beyond 2021. And this massive black swan event, I think, if it's done anything for the business world, it has shown us or laid bare all of our many shortcomings in terms of the rigidity of our business processes and our lack of visibility into our very businesses themselves. And because of this, what we at Omdia have seen is a radical acceleration of efforts that have gone into digitizing and instrumenting those assets and processes within the businesses. And I think, Satya Nadella from Microsoft, their CEO, back at the end of April, I think he said it best when he was talking about how Microsoft was internally handling the pandemic. And he said, in 2 years, we've seen basically 2 months of digital transformation. 2 months. They've seen 2 years of digital transformation, just to give you an idea of how rapid the shift has been to a virtual workforce and a virtual economy. So where I'd like to now start talking about that digital transformation is in mentioning the truth that we all know, and that is that not every company is like Microsoft. Not every company has the necessary foundation in data and analytics to put 2 years into 2 months for digitally transforming their businesses, and especially putting AI to work within that. In our research at Omdia, we've actually seen a widening gap between the early adopters, the Microsofts of the world, and the trailers, those who are perhaps investigating, because I think, as you saw from Chuck, the penetration into the enterprise is nigh on 80% of people who have been using AI, but the scaling of that AI has only reached roughly 7%, where they're using it across all of their departments. So there are the AI haves and the AI have-nots, and we think that it's a shame actually, because I believe, and I think everyone I'm speaking to here believes that AI has a lot to offer companies, and case in point is, here's a quick list of the top use cases as we track them for AI in retail. And you'll note from the very bottom one there that I put in blue, and it's in the bottom just because for emphasis. If anyone here has tried to buy Clorox wipes in the last 10 months, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, that the fragility of our supply chains has really been laid bare recently. So, oops. Apologies, I thought I just jumped, but there I go. That's the right slide. Okay, so just thinking about the supply chain itself, there are a number of extremely impactful use cases that I'd like to mention, all of which I should note aren't about replacing humans, but instead augmenting their decision-making processes. And as you can see, we have actually, I've highlighted here the top use cases by spend. And it's not just the supply chain, it's customer experience management and product marketing that I think all go together. And you'll see when I talk about demand planning, how that works. And if you look at them all together, that spend alone within the AI software market is going to be more than companies are spending on their actual infrastructure itself. All right, so how is that being spent in the supply chain? Where is that money going? Well, to begin with, the first one I'd like to just mention, I'm just going to run through these quickly, is warehouse management. And this is, of course, how do you avoid overstocking or understocking your shelves? How do you actually go about making sure that the shelf pickers, the folks who go around and pull things off the shelves, have the most expedient routes planned out for them based upon their fulfillment plans? But it's more than that. I think you guys may have seen, it was just yesterday that Amazon announced Panorama, this new tool that they're putting into their warehouses that's actually going to allow them to monitor and help revise social distancing rules within their warehouse to make them most effective to keep their workforce working, which is very important. Second one I want to mention is last mile tracking, and this is where AI can help you plan delivery routes that are highly that are sensitive to localized factors. So a water main breaks in a town, the route, and its impact downstream and upstream, pun intended, I guess, can be accommodated. Those are important. The next one I want to mention is quality control and inspection. And this is one of my favorites because here we're talking about image recognition to more effectively identify stock damage so that you don't ship off some damaged goods to your customers and risk a negative reviews online, which I'm going to mention in a few moments because those need to figure into your supply chain. Next one, and I think the most important and the biggest challenge overall for us in this industry, is the visibility of our supply chain. The end-to-end visibility that's on a top-down view, but a bottom-up view that gives you and everyone else in the supply chain access to real-time data on order processes, inventory, deliveries, potential supply chain disruptions, et cetera. And the last is AI can have a great impact in helping you better predict how to move goods through your supply chain. This is something we've all been working with for many years using your traditional statistical methodologies. But AI, as I'll talk to you about in the next slide, can really go a long way to help you not just make the most efficient supply chain, but actually help you see ahead and predict and to understand where the changes, where your impacts might be. Is there going to be an outage? Am I going to run out of Clorox wipes? So let me now just drop into that a little bit and just spend a moment talking about how that works for decision planning. And as you'll all remember, decision planning is a broad way of looking at the supply chain management process for forecasting or predicting the demand for products to ensure that you've got the goods on the shelves. And I feel like this is one of those crucial proof points because, as I mentioned earlier, this doesn't work alone. The supply chain is not the only source of data that's important to you. You need to take into account customer service, marketing, R&D, and that's why I mentioned those two spend areas earlier. At any rate, if you use AI in your design planning, what you can look forward to is the ability to have, instead of one monolithic model that you have to put 8 months into, only to find that it's only 80% effective or worse. Instead, you can have challenger models, many of them running simultaneously, that can help you to pick the champion that's best going to reflect what's happening in the market. And better than that is that you can actually use AI to run these and revise them in real time to measure them against the market as it changes. And lastly, there's a lot of the traditional decision planning was made up of a lot of spreadsheet pushing of numbers and a lot of manual processes. And AI can go a long way toward automating those processes to help your planners be more effective than just moving calculations in a spreadsheet. But there are a bunch of caveats I want to point out before we move on. And the first, as I mentioned on the last slide, is power chain transparency. That is a big problem that can deeply damage your planning process. What do you know about the folks that are in your supply chain, about their operational disciplines, their schedule adherence? How reliable are they? That's important to know. Second is something we all run up against, and that is siloed data. It's so hard to see into what's happening in marketing and what's happening in sales and R&D because all of those departments set up their own Snowflake data warehouse, and they don't know how to play well with everybody else, but they need to. But even if you don't have data silos, I just want to say that it's not enough. You need more information. You need information outside the organization. We all know that a planning model is a map, and the map is not the territory, but the more information you add to that map, the better your resolution will be, the better your plans will be. And that brings me on to talking about external data to kick off our discussion today. If you're going to invest in AI, you're going to need a lot of data, and you're going to need that data from both inside and outside, as I just said. Fortunately, there are a tremendous number of resources available to we practitioners to help us build better models or better maps. You have access to star ratings, expert reviews, initial usage patterns from inside. From outside, you've got weather data. You've got information on natural disasters, societal crises, which we've seen that's kind of a big deal. There's literally a plethora of what we call in the trade these metrics and measures that you can put to use in making your models more accurate. And thanks to the API economy, they're pretty easy to come by. I can, with just 1 or 2 lines of code, pull in my Jupyter notebook, one of 218,000 data sets that the U.S. government has made available to us, for instance, covering everything from climate, education, finance, et cetera. It's really, really something else. But as with everything, there's no free ride, and every cloud that has a silver lining is indeed a cloud. And you need to be aware that if you're going to use external data, that it's not an off-the-shelf endeavor. You're not just going to do those 3 lines of code in your Jupyter notebook and be running with your data scientists happy-go-lucky. You're going to need to spend you're going to need to invest in the preparation of that data, the cleansing of that data, the ensuring that it's in line with your policies around master data management within your organization. Secondly, you should also, I think, and this is more of advice what to do, is you should look for already curated data sets, some that are easily consumable. There are a lot of formats out there, and if you see a data set and it's text, it's CVS only, that's, look somewhere else, because you want something that's in Avro, JSON, Parquet, et cetera. You need something that's built for the enterprise. And that brings me to the next bit of advice, which is look for open data exchanges. Look for sites like your Humanitarian Data Exchange or AWS's Data Exchange. There's the older one, DAWX, et cetera. All of those are useful. But within each industry, you can see a lot of very specific curated data hubs that you can look to. Lastly, before I leave you guys, I just want to ask you to consider some interesting new ideas and things that are coming down the pipe. We have, for instance, this idea of reinforcement learning. If you guys know AlphaGo, that beat the Go and chess people handily, it did so because it just learns by rules of the game and not data. It's not looking at the past, it's looking at how you win the game. And I feel like that's going to play a huge role in supply chains in the coming years. So invest in looking at that. Second is invest in ideas like differential privacy, and in looking at different ways of pulling in information between companies. I think if you think about federated learning, you can look at the finance industry, and those folks are using it to move data safely and securely for their ML models across regions where before they were locked, Germany, Canada, et cetera. They're using this internally, but they're also using it to work cooperatively. So for anomaly detection and fraud detection, these companies are using ideas like federated learning and differential privacy to actually share data amongst one another. So in summary, there are a lot of opportunities available to put AI to work in the supply chain. The trick, though, is to first build a solid data foundation and to invest in the necessary AI expertise to build that more agile, that more resilient and cost-effective supply chain. So with that, I thank you all, and I'll turn things back over to Chuck.
Oh, that was great. Great points. That's a fabulous foundation, Brad. Thank you so much. Now, to segue from your comments about AI expertise, we're going to now turn this over to our famous fireside chat. That I'm going to turn it over to Amaresh.
Hey, thanks, Chuck and Brad. Great setup, and really some of the points that you just raised in terms of where things are going and some of like where we are versus kind of where we are going, I think it's very relevant. I think it gives you is a great, excellent backdrop to the discussion that Tom and Bill and I will be having. So Tom and Bill really look forward to this interesting discussion of fantastic work you guys have been doing at Bose. And I know, we have kind of partnered with you along the journey there. But it's a much broader and bigger program there. So just wanted to kind of just share a little bit and kind of try to kind of in some ways what Brad has been talking about, what Chuck has been talking about, just the broader context. But then how does that actually come to life? Let's talk a little bit about that. So Tom, let me just start with you. I know you've been kind of grappling with demand forecasting, new product introduction, and everything. Do you want to just set up a little bit about the challenges you are facing at the beginning of this journey as you were trying to modernize the supply chain, bring in technology and AI into the mix there? Can you just talk a little, kind of paint the picture a little bit of the kind of the situation and what you were trying to solve for? Tom? Tom or Bill, can you hear me? Chuck, can you hear me?
Is Bill there as well?
Yeah,
and Tom?
This is Bill. I'll jump in until
Sure.
Tom, maybe he's having a technical challenge. No problem. Yes. So
Sure.
we've been trying to chase a few key things. One of the biggest challenges we have is really around forecasting and how much our products we're really going to sell, and it's really focused on the new products. That's where our biggest challenges really live. today we could have a 40% error difference between ongoing products and our new products, and it has to do with so many challenges and unknowns in the market. How is our price going to be? How is our competitor reaction going to be, et cetera? So really trying to get our hands around that. So in terms of the work we've been partnering with Genpact on is trying to get our hands around what other outside influences are there that can help us with really understanding the way that our products are resonating very quickly, using only like 4 weeks of data is really where we're trying to start with. And then what does that mean for our ongoing forecast? So it's really from a business perspective of how quickly can we find out how our products are going to resonate, and then adjusting our forecasts as quickly as possible.
And Bill, I mean, just to give some context there. So how many new products roughly? I mean, are we talking about a big volume issue, or like is it like there's a lot of colors and variations? Like like what's the size of the complexity of the problem on the new products?
It can very much vary, and it's a great question. We just recently launched some totally wireless in-ear products, and that is a highly competitive area. We have a few colors, 3 colors of 2 different products that are sold globally, and we're trying to get our hands around how do they resonate in one market versus another, one key retailer versus another. So SKU-wise, it's not huge when you compare to any other industries, but from our perspective, it's more about the total volume impact than it is about necessarily the mix within the SKUs themselves.
Amarish, Thomas back online.
Hi, Tom. So basically, and I hope you heard Bill what Bill said. So basically, it's kind of the variation. So it's the planning within the SKU mix that you have to kind of get it right. Not the number of SKUs, which is more important. So kind of precision probably becomes more important. So given so how have you been tackling the challenge, Tom? I mean, in terms of, that's the problem in terms of doing the new product introductions, and you have to understand the total volume and the SKUs and some of the nuances that Bill mentioned. How did you go about solving for it?
Yeah, so we actually started with the insights that we have a big difference in our bias for MPI products and what we call sustained products, right? Sustained products that are on the market for 6 months or longer. And we basically saw that our bias is very, very low. We're quite good at that. It's really the MPI where we saw the largest levels of deviation. And since we have our introductions is big, it can make a big impact, right? So we had been hearing and reading about beer companies and ice cream companies and how they look at the weather in order to predict what they're going to sell. But I'd never come across anything good example other than that. So I thought, well, if it's not out there, we probably need to try it ourselves, right? And explore ourselves if this can be useful for us. And that's basically where it started, Amarish.
Got it. And then and how have you been kind of so it started that how did you go about looking for the data, the external variables, or it could be like external, the data that you've not been using traditionally, it would be internal, but you've not been using. What was the process of going through that?
Yeah, we were lucky. Bose 3 years ago started to put a digital analytics group together with some people that were really specialized in this. And what they started to do, and we thought they weren't very productive at the time, but what they started to do is collect boatloads of data, classify the data, clean the data, and just have a lot of data. So when we got in contact with them, inquiring if they could help us, they basically said, yes, we can, but you will need some horsepower elsewhere because we've collected all the data, are working on other projects, and we have no time to help you. So that's how we got in contact with Genpact. But the fundamental thing that helped us, they had many external data sources available. So when we then got in contact with Genpact, they gave us like 15 to 20 elements to start analyzing correlations with, to see which ones were useful that we could use in building our model. And that's why it also all came together very, very quickly. We started this project coming right off of the summer holidays in August. And basically 8 weeks later, we had a model that retrospectively, when we used some of our introductions last year with the data available at that time, we saw that we would go from a bias that we had of more than 50% using the model, it would get us back to something like 9%. So really an amazing improvement that we never dreamt would be even possible.
Wow, that's fascinating. So just one more point around that, and I think Brad has been speaking about it. How much do you think that improvement from 50% bias to 9% bias was driven by data? How much was driven by kind of just your understanding the business so you can translate the data, or more sophisticated math, like more sophisticated models? I mean, I know it's hard to kind of tease it out, but like where do you think the more value kind of came from in that exercise?
Yeah, it's absolutely the data itself. Normally, our forecast up until then was solely based on statistical models, which obviously look at a lot of your history and then your actual performance. And we were already using sell-through based data. But the crux was, and the difference really came when we found the right demand signals that were actually predicting in advance what we would be selling. And those were the things like product reviews, but also very much our website visitations. And within that, our quality website visitations, which were defined as, a customer is longer than, I believe it's 2 minutes on a certain page. That had a dominant correlation to what we were seeing later, a week later, in the marketplace.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. So it's basically what you're telling is the digital data, or like that you potentially, had access to. You had never connected it back to your demand forecasting, and the moment you did that, you saw a huge lift.
Yeah, that's it. That's absolutely
wonderful.
It.
Wonderful. The other question I had was how. So one thing is to do it one time, right? You kind of did it, and you've proven that this data works and model works. How are you thinking about scaling it? Scaling from two dimensions, both from now you have to kind of now that you know these data work, you have to kind of collect that data on an ongoing basis. So that's scaling in terms of, I don't know whether they had a set number of SKUs you started with, or how we did it. Like, how do you do it across the entire portfolio? Like, just any thoughts around that you have as you have been thinking about it?
Yeah, so since we started to eat from the pie called demand sensing, and we like what we're tasting, the whole next, and we believe we're getting very good results out of it. The next question is, how are we going to take this to the next level, right? So that's actually a workshop we've got planned in a couple of weeks, where the questions are going to be, okay, we only look now at 2 specific products, so are we going to take it to new categories? Should we have a different approach when we take it to do new categories? Are there other demand signals that could become relevant? How about our geographies? We started in North America. North America has unilateral pricing. Unilateral pricing is easy because it's one variant you then don't need to take into account, at least when it comes to your own product. But when we look at places like Europe, Japan, or even Australia, prices are up for the marketplace to determine. So you get another set of variables that you need to look at. Then, taking it back to where we currently are with our in-ear headphones, can we make the model itself better by looking at other type of demand signals? So we don't have the right answers yet. And the other thing is we started with MPI. Should we take it beyond MPI product? Is there a need for that? So I think I just mentioned 4 considerations in itself, right? That we need to start taking decisions on how to grow this further. And it's clearly that we need to grow this further. And then an element that I even have touched upon is, do we have the right people in the organization to take this further and the right capabilities?
Interesting. One of the points, as you were just describing, that just became very real for me was it seems like it's the team structure that worked on the project with you, right? Because the way you were laying out, it's not only the data, it's about how you were bringing the data and the knowledge of the business together. How did you guys achieve that during the POC stage and everything? Because like what markets, which variables, I mean, the way you were rattling it off, it was very clear that it's a mix, it's an interdisciplinary team. So tell me a little bit about the team structure that actually helped you do this.
Yeah, so I remember Bill and I sitting with our lead of advanced analytics. This was, I think it was around Christmas last year, about brainstorming how we could start using advanced analytics in forecasting, right? And at that time, it was clear that they're working on many other projects, didn't have a lot of time for us, but we kept insisting that the concept could deliver a lot of added value in our space, because impacts on inventory, having the right product, generating the margin can be large. So it was really after the summer holidays that we reached out. We got our demand or our advanced analytics team, the leader there, on board. He also shrewdly identified that we needed to get market intelligence on board. Because the other thing that we did is not looking at demand sensing patterns for your own product, but also look at competitive positioning compared to other products in eyes of the customers, right? So the modeling as an input takes something called a product similarity index that you use as a score for your product, how it compares to others. But that's done on different parameters that are important to customers at different levels, right? For in-ear headphones, you can have battery duration. How long does the battery work? You can look at aesthetical elements, sound quality, charging time. So various benefits to customers that needed to be rated.
Tom, I think
he may have frozen again.
For anyone else?
Yeah. I actually wanted to add a little more to the tail end of your question as well, which is how do we trust the answers at the end, right? Which is,
yes,
here we have this data which tells us X, and do I believe it? And I will say within our organization, there's a lot of skepticism, right? And we always want to test everything, which is why our first step is definitely a test. We're only doing the work on a smaller subset so that we can understand it. Just today, I brought forward and shared a lot of this data among some of my colleagues, and there was a lot of questions about that doesn't really fit with what I believe. And it's going to take us some time. I mean, change management is going to be a very key element of this discussion, right? We're going to hold the data. We're going to start to prove the value of this data. And we're going to question it as well, right? We're going to question it where it doesn't make logical sense and say, is there a reason for the answer what it is? However, we're still going to prove that the forecast updates make sense or they don't. We're going to prove that accuracy. My hope is that it will be better because it's more based off of true data and more a better algorithm of really what's happening. So with that, we'll be able to expand it further by proving that case of the data is going to give us an answer that's free of emotions, right? That's the proof that we need to work with. And that will take time, but we see ourselves expanding and using it across more and more products as already we're seeing a quick benefit.
That's awesome. And Bill, one final question. I know you are in the journey. And so you probably there's not a whole lot of learnings as yet. But how that last point you just mentioned that the machines will produce the insights without any emotions, but the humans are going to input the insights and make decisions with a fair amount of emotions. So how are you trying to how are you thinking of managing that change? Any 2 or 3 broad points you want to share in terms of how you're orchestrating that?
Yes, and this is really where our sales and operations planning process helps us, because most of the discussions end up becoming the large-scale aggregate decisions. Do we need more capacity? Do we need more lines? Do we have 2 feet, right? And we want to use this data to help us keep people in check from the exuberance that often happens when we bring a new product to market. And we've historically, and this is many years going back, when we launch a new product, we find that, we've got huge interest in this and we need to make as many as we can. And it turns out that our initial estimates maybe were more accurate and we didn't need to go through all this extra, right? Which causes huge inventory churn. It's a lot of challenge. So by using this data, we really see that we can keep the leaders that are making these decisions in a frame of reasonableness. Let's just make sure that we're not driving too much. We're not reacting the wrong way, and using that data to keep our frame tighter.
Got it. So basically what I heard 2 things, I'm just kind of paraphrasing you. One is kind of there is a process which helps. I mean, this is not it's the whole, all the AI and everything, it's not in isolation of a structured way that you are anyways doing business, and it's integrated into that. That I think is a key point, because many times I've seen the exuberance on the AI side would we forget about the process side. And I think the second piece that's really, really important is even if it's not about a point estimate, is it providing the right guardrails? And that itself has a lot of value in providing the right guardrails. But Bill and Tom, I mean, you guys are always on my holiday shopping list, and just from a personal perspective. So it's really cool, and we got a kick out of it to kind of work with you on such an important product for such a legendary brand. So thank you for for the partnership, but more importantly, sharing some of it is unfolding. The saga is unfolding on this thing. A lot to learn from, and hopefully all the audience here also got a lot out of it. But thank you so much, and Chuck, back to you.
Thank you, Amresh. Great stuff. And you're right. I think Bose is on all of our shopping lists for the season. A very, very well-known brand. Now we're going to go into a conversation for our panel. So if we could get everyone to say hello, and we will start our panel discussion. Amresh?
Hello.
Hello.
Tom, you there?
Yeah.
And Brad?
I am there.
Hello.
And Bill?
I am here as well.
Terrific. Well, welcome all. Thank you. This is great content, guys. Great stuff. I've got a question for you, Bill. You've been at Bose for more than 15 years. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you've seen the supply chain evolve over the years, and where on earth did AI come into the picture?
Have you ever heard the reference to moving like a cruise ship? It takes a long time to turn, right? So we've used statistical forecasting for as long as I can remember as a baseline, but very much just applied by an individual thinking, here is a model that I'm going to apply, which was built out of a selection of choices based off of history. It wasn't until the last year and a half or so that we really rebuilt our entire demand planning structure. And when we did that, as Tom mentioned, we're using sell-through data as a core element of the way we build our statistical forecast. And that's also where we've partnered with Genpact to help us build that using AI. And they're applying models that allow to best fit the scenario across all of our SKU, location, customer combinations that we forecast. So we've got a lot more detailed data now than we've ever had with the sell-through, and a lot more customer level insight than we've ever had before, and applying that to give us that real forecast data that, as we just talked about, that's based off of what does the data say and not what do my emotions say. Now, we still relate that to the next step of a person's best view of what are the events on top of that, what activities are we going to do that will change this baseline. But we start our core forecast for all products now with a statistically based forecast that's really generated off of what the math says.
Great stuff. And Tom, you're here, right, Tom?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so anything you want to add to that? No, I think Bill said it perfectly. Nothing to add. Okay, agreed. Amresh, I wonder if you can talk about what kinds of business you see as best suited for supply chain AI innovations. Is it one versus another, or are they all suited for it?
So one is the obvious answer is anyone who is manufacturing anything, right? I mean, that's just a given, and you would there's no option rather kind of just to move in that direction as we drive for right efficiency, resiliency in supply chains, right? Whether it's consumer products manufacturers to consumer goods to like car manufacturers, just choose one, right? I mean, anyone who has a manufacturing plant for sure. Or doing some sort of logistics. But increasingly what we are seeing is also what generally is called service supply chain, right? Think about mortgage applications. Think about call centers. Basically, anytime there is basically data moving rather than like stuff moving, like data moving in terms of either documents or conversations or anything in some sort of a service supply chain. So a lot of the same concepts. I would say the manufacturing supply chain has obviously been a lot more ahead in terms of thinking about it. But the service supply chain companies which run service supply chains, which is, again, the whole host of other companies, they're also kind of taking this leaf out of the same book and using a lot of AI in terms of kind of planning and kind of managing skill sets in different places. So I think that some of the applicability here is across the board.
So where do you see, like companies like Bose, it sounds like they were kind of on the way and then they needed help. Is that what you find with companies where they start to gather a lot of data and then they say, we have all this data, now what do we do with it?
Yeah, I mean, on our experience, clients work through, they are all on a journey and they need help and partnerships in different phases of the journey, depending on what they see as strategic to build it, to where they need strategic partnership and where they would kind of, in some cases, it is you're augmenting on capacity, and in some cases you are kind of doing a very different way of strategic partnership and having skin in the game. There's a whole host of models there. I think the broader problem is, if you really step back, is there is going to be more of AI-driven supply chains, or AI-driven everything, but AI-driven supply chains are going to happen, right? And for that, there is a set of technical skills that will be required, and there will be a set of skills that will be required to bring in the business insights and just the knowledge of exactly how the business works. And whichever way I think the partnership and then the journey happens, it's blending those two together, whether it's in the strategy phase of it, whether it's in the execution phase of it, or scaling phase of it. In all three phases, we see and we partner with our clients. But it's about how you actually do it, in which context that probably matters. And we see a lot of demand on our side also, primarily because it's imperative pretty much for every supply chain to be thinking about external data, thinking about AI tools and models, thinking about end-to-end visibility, and then how do you actually make it real? That's kind of getting it to the insights is one piece of it, but actually how do you make it real and change the behaviors of people to do things? So I think there's a lot of demand from that perspective.
Yeah, I love the concept of it's a journey. I think that's what people are finding out, that AI isn't an event. It really is a journey. Brad, speaking of journeys, I wonder if you could talk about some of the trends you're seeing around AI, machine learning, and supply chain innovations.
Yeah, sure, guys. So I'll kind of just do three. First one is something that's not a new trend. It's been around since data science, before data science was a thing, and that's an idea called continuous intelligence. The analytics and data communities have been trying to build toward this for decades now, and it's only in the last probably 5 or 6 years that the economies of scale on the hyperscalers on the cloud and with multi and hybrid cloud technologies coming into better maturity, that we're actually starting to see this sort of convergence of data across the enterprise, be that on-prem or in the cloud or across multiple clouds. And so I feel like if those of you listening are in a situation where you are trying to bring together insight and visibility across your entire enterprise, now is a good time. But make sure you invest in ideas like data cataloging and metadata management as a means of understanding just what's sitting in which S3 bucket where on your on a different cloud platforms, et cetera. The second one is the democratization of data and data science itself. And, we were talking about earlier bringing in that idea of business knowledge and tying it into data. And when you look at technologies like AutoML and NLP, which is natural language processing, and inside of that you have ideas like natural language generation, you're actually going to be able to, the maturity of those, which is getting better and better, and the scope is getting wider and wider for those, is making it so that companies that are investing in data science and AI don't have to rely totally on data scientists and folks that have just been plucked out of college. They can actually put decisions and help people that have the domain expertise within their company work hand in hand with the data scientists and the data engineers and the ML engineers and actually participate in this important process. So to me, that's super important. And as you might imagine here, given what I'm going to say in a second, I'm going upscale in terms of importance of these three trends. So the third one is something that the guys mentioned earlier that I think is really important, and that is trust in AI. You cannot just trust what you see. And I think actually, Bill, you had mentioned that data is free of emotions. Sorry to tell you, man, but it's not. If you look at real popular models, super huge models like GPT-3, for instance, it is totally biased, and that is because data reflects the people that generate the data, and if you have bias in the people that collect the data and build the data, you're going to have bias in the data. If you're the people that build the models and build the algorithms to make AI work with the data have biases, it's all going to be biased. So to me, the third trend, and the one I think we should keep our closest eye on because there's been the least done to really help with this in terms of products being built, it's the trust in data. So how accurate, how secure, how ethical, how safe, talking about autonomous vehicles there, how understandable is the AI that you're trying to put into use in your organization? Who's responsible for it if something goes wrong? Those are all questions that we really don't have good answers to yet. Yeah, that's it, Chuck.
Yeah,
Chuck, are you there?
I think probably some technical issues there, probably from Chuck. But Brad, just to add on to a couple of points, I mean, all three are like super relevant. One thing around the scaling aspect of it that kind of links to that I see often is your point one, right? Your point one is you can do a lot of interesting POCs and experiments. To scale it, the data foundation has to be done in the right way, the understanding of master data, which in some ways it's kind of like, I would say, that's not the sexiest part of like the whole AI and everything. It's kind of the backwaters in some ways. But that is
It's pretty sexy, but no one else thinks so.
So it's the foundational work around the master data and the data glossary and the governance aspect of it that many times becomes the failure point for scaling some of these really wonderful ideas. So that's, I think I couldn't disagree with you more on some of the way you laid it out.
Yeah, thanks, Amresh.
I don't know if Chuck is back.
Do we have Chuck back?
Yeah, if Chuck's still not here, I wanted to add a point first to Brad's comments. First off, Brad, there's no bias. Come on, in data. All right, that's a joke, right? But hey, it's a big step. It is a big step away from where we've been in the past, where emotions rule all the business, right? So that's plus. But that actually where I wanted to talk a little bit more about was your concept of trying to match up the data scientists and this AI results with the business, people who understand the business. And I think that's a super important long-term view of where we're going, right? Which is you can't rely on one or the other by itself and really be effective. I think you need to use the AI and the results to give you a good baseline and understanding of where things are moving. And then you have to apply the business insight to, does it make sense? Is this the way we want to go? And really match those two to come up with the business path you want to take, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to start with the business, do you not? You can't just hire a data scientist and say, here's our supply chain, automate everything you can, augment whatever you think makes sense. It can't work that way. It might be a way of identifying some early proof of concepts. But if you're really serious about AI in the supply chain and you want to have that sort of cumulative, culture of data that influences the way and drives the way your supply chain works, you have to do it with full understanding of the business and have that be the starting and ending point.
Yeah, I mean, just to build upon that a little bit. So I'm on the board of University of North Carolina in Charlotte, and they just launched, and I've been kind of involved in the data science education for like years with them. And they just started the School of Data Science. And what's really interesting about the School of Data Science is kind of exactly to Bill's point. It is not a school in itself, kind of standalone school in itself. It's actually a school that kind of is a confluence of 4 different schools: the School of Engineering, the School of Computer Science, from Computer Science. It's the School of Business, and it's with School of Health and Human Services, like health and human side of things. And it's about these all 4 or 5 programs work together, and then they have a layer of like analytics and AI on top of it, and that's how they've created it. So I think that's exactly the model of the future. It's about what we call bilingual. I mean, in Genpact terms, we call it bilingual, but it's like, how do you kind of talk the supply chain language and the AI language together? Because that's where the magic happens. Independently, both of them are, okay, but you won't make a lot of progress.
Yeah, I'm with you, Amresh, and it's actually, I'm thinking octolingual. If we think about all of the roles that go into a successful AI outcome, starting with the sponsor, the domain expert, the data wrangler, the DBA, the machine learning expert, the data scientist, the IT pros that are tasked with taking this stuff live and managing it once it goes live. You've got a huge group of people that need to work in concert across a lot of domains that are pretty not alike, let's just say.
Yeah. Yes, it's a team sport.
Indeed.
I don't know if you've dealt with it, but the issue of bias is where I left. Is there a way to get rid of it?
Don't use it. Don't use AI is a good way to avoid bias, but that's not a good answer. If you guys don't mind, can I just say? Oh, sorry, Chuck. Okay, so very quickly, bias, as I was mentioning, isn't just in the data; it's in the people and in the process and the platform. Believe it or not, all of that can influence the outcome of an AI project in unanticipated ways. And so to truly root out bias, you have to start and look at the full spectrum of the problem. And I'll tell you, I've been tracking this space for a while, waiting for productized solutions to appear magically. And if you guys remember, IBM, it was like maybe 2 years ago, rolled out 2 different tools that allowed you to see if you had bias in your algorithms and in your data set. And those only worked for one specific use case in one specific vertical. That tells you how difficult the problem is. It is difficult, but I don't mean to be gloom and doom, because it doesn't have to really be like that to be effective. If you look at some of the tools we're seeing coming out of folks like Amazon or AWS with SageMaker, and the tools they have in there to allow you and I should say Google as well, to allow you to basically take your models and not just see if they're reaching whatever percentage point you say is right, but then trying to put them against a set of KPIs for meaning and truth and trust and ethics within your organization, and to evaluate them in a broader context. And that to me is a great way forward, because it can be applied anywhere.
Love it. Amrish, besides Bose, you've got clients like Panasonic, Kraft Heinz. I mean, these are massive organizations in terms of the scope of supply chains. How does a company get their arms around that? What's the process?
The process of the supply chain or process of integrating AI?
Well, the process of getting going. I mean, these are big challenges, basically, end to end.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think, as I said, it's they're all on some part of the journey, right? I mean, and normally like in every journey, you would have there's a little bit of strategy and planning, but it starts with, I mean, believe it or not, I mean, it will start with someone's desire to drive the change, right? I have sometimes the financial desire to kind of drive the change. There is sometimes it's like, I mean, from a comparative perspective, I mean, we see a lot right now because every industry is the digitization that I think you started with around Satya Nadella's quote. With the digitization that is happening, and we see so many things moving online, I mean, like of our clients, I mean, it just becomes, you just can't afford not to have that. So it becomes a comparative imperative. Forget about the cost, right? I mean, you actually might increase the cost, but it becomes a comparative. So I think there are strategic imperatives that essentially get you started in a journey like this, right? And I think the interesting part that we have seen is clients actually take one of two approaches, and sometimes depending on how big the burning platform is, sometimes it's like, listen, we just need to go and change. I think some of the clients that we have had, some of the bigger ones that just mentioned also, they're like, listen, we just need to move the change because either we need to restructure a cost portfolio, or we need to kind of completely change because we won't be comparative. And for them, they are essentially looking at think about the people, process, technology, thinking about, okay, what's the reskilling of the people they need to do? What is the new process they need to roll out at the same time? And how they are thinking about the digitization and the technology aspect, whether it's kind of cloud-based tools from kind of the traditional ERPs to data science teams to AI, building AI. So they kind of do all of it together as a big transformation program. So that's kind of one end of the spectrum that we see, and we are seeing it more and more in supply chain, by the way. Right?
So Tom,
and traditionally, yeah, but on the other side, we see kind of folks making more incremental choices and proving it and feeling comfortable and kind of expanding from there on. Both approaches are fine, depending on where you are in probably the broader corporate journey.
Tom and Bill, what are the internal processes to get this going? Is it a hard sell? Do you have to have a proof of concept? Do people believe you, or do you have to actually show them?
Yeah, Chuck. Good question. It's not for that we started with a proof of concept, because we wanted to show what we could deliver, right, in order to get more funds available for growing this into the future. I was very surprised that when Bill and I at Christmas a year ago sat with our head of AI, that we seemed to be low on his totem pole in interest to get them to work with us and help us. So we really needed to convince people of the impact we could have from either inventory reduction point of view or a margin generation point of view. Yeah, that required some selling. It wasn't an immediate thing, although as a company, we are spending a lot of time and effort on digitization as a whole, right? That's why this group was formed to begin with.
Bill, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is the point of, yes, we have to sell it. It feels that even in a company where we are focused as much on growing our digitalization, our tools with AI, every step is about proving that the new process can work, and that's we are an engineering-based company, so it's very much based off of facts and figures. So as we keep building into the future, we have to prove that it is a better model, and the results prove that it's a better model, right? So it's a journey from that standpoint.
So do you have to prove every single thing, or at some point after proving several things, they say just go with it?
I think it's mostly about proving the concepts, and there will always be exceptions to that rule. But from I think Tom and my perspective, we're right now our proof of concept is using a small subset to prove that this will work, and then we will be able to incorporate that into our processes going forward at a broader scale.
Awesome. Amrish, I wonder if you could talk about some of the short-term potential for AI for any of these companies that they're thinking of they should jump in too because their competitors are. What's sort of a short-term win?
As I said, I mean, I think one of the short-term wins is not to think about it in short term. And I really believe that it's because it is as I said, it is a journey. It is if you fundamentally see what you're doing is in most of the time you are trying to replace or like pieces of the work that humans were making decisions on with machines, which are more apt making decisions, and then let the humans do what humans do or do better, right? And that process, just think about in your own life, right? I mean, think about like how we think about our personal investments, this and like all of that stuff. It takes years to kind of go through that. So I actually don't think the approach around that there is a short term, like a silver bullet approach. To be honest, that probably has done more harm by creating hype around AI rather than good for the long term potential here. So that's kind of like, it really reminds me sometimes of like late 90s. Like when I think
the AI winter.
But the AI winter, I think the way to just, in my mind, to think about it is, yeah, are there things to kind of start from? Like, listen, forecasting is one area where it is probably a good area to prove the concept, right? Where and it's a relatively easier area compared to I think you talked about like moving like within warehouses, this and that, a lot more complicated to do that. I mean, in a couple of areas than others, right? So I think there are a few areas which are easier to prove the concept, to choose Bill's word. But at the same time, even if you prove the concept, if you're not committed to it over at least a medium term to kind of follow through with it, you're not going to see any value.
Go ahead, Brad. I see you nodding.
Oh, heavens, yes. Yeah, it is. You can't think of this short term. I mean, every model that the company generates it's not a one and done. It's not build and fire and let it run. Google maintains, 3,000 active models, and I don't even know how many engineers actually maintain that, but it's a lot. Because to me, every model is a living entity. I like to think of them as bonsai trees. You know what I mean? Success of a model, over time it grows in value, but it's not, a sudden boof, big tree. You have to prune it carefully, water it carefully, make sure it doesn't get a cold draft, et cetera. And so to really scale AI over time, you can't just start with we got a good POC, we pushed out the door. What's the next project? You have to think about every one of those as a living entity that has to live in a little forest of bonsais, if you will.
Brad, just to add, go ahead. Sorry, I want to add one interesting anecdote here to the whole bonsai tree there, Chuck. So we do a lot of work in financial services where the models are regulatory models, right? How much kind of basically all the stress. Think about all the stress tests that the banks have to have, how much capital reserves they need to have. And those models are there, and a bunch of those models have been built after 2008, the financial crisis of 2008. And if you actually go and apply the same models, which our teams have been kind of doing and helping a lot of our financial services clients, based on what actually happened in quarter two, basically there will be not a single bank, the reserves that you would want to have, not a single bank will be solvent, right? So you have to be thinking a little bit about the context in which things are happening, and again, pruning the bonsai tree in the right way to kind of put it in the right context for what's going on. So it's literally a living thing that you just have to always pay attention to.
Great stuff. Brad, I wonder if you could talk about the timing with the post-pandemic world, what that looks like in this context.
Yes, let me put my prognostication hat on. I don't know. Nobody truly knows, but we in Omdia, we did some research in the summer, and we saw that within a couple markets, the software market, that like a 68% of companies were truly expecting a U, or a V-shaped recovery starting next year, just based on earlier efforts in APAC in particular, where APAC has seen like a 4% return to profitability overall since Q2 of this year. So it is true that we're not looking at this like the 2008 crash. We're looking at this as a true anomaly that will resolve more rapidly than that did. But because you can't know, and as Amaresh was saying, you have to build your models for the context you're in. We all thought that we would be opening back up for business, correct? And that the international borders and stay-at-home orders have not been what we had hoped they would be. When we're going to get the vaccines is not what we anticipated, and so being able to model for those is paramount to succeeding with AI, and that's why there are concepts that I didn't really mention when I was doing my presentation, but the concept of using like correlate data, taking an event that doesn't really apply to you, but then it's something you can use to base your model on because it's a similar event. Because I think Bill, Tom, you guys mentioned it earlier with looking at different types of headphones that aren't even the same, but then using lessons learned from that to make your models more successful. That's what I'm talking about.
Got it. Great stuff. Tom or Bill, can you talk about some things that have not worked that you found in terms of approaches? Tom?
What has not worked? The only thing that I can say, we were from the beginning very convinced that star ratings was it, right? So we were feeding the guys testing and working on the models with star ratings. And then they came back and they said, we're not finding a correlation. And we were like going, no, you must be wrong, right? You've got it all wrong. It's impossible that there cannot be a correlation. And then we discussed it a little bit more. I don't know who mentioned it. But then somebody said, should we not be looking at our rating vis-a-vis the rating from your key competitors? Because if everybody is at a 3.5 or everybody is at a 4, it will indeed not make a difference. So then we looked at, got competitor ratings in, looked at the delta, the positive delta we had compared to the average of the competitors, or I think it was the best off, and then we started to see a stronger dominance of effect that had. Still being the absolute dominant one, which had been probably the result of star ratings, people going to our website and inspect the product more in detail based on what they heard or saw elsewhere.
Great. Amrish, I want you to talk about some things that you see when a client approaches you or you're dealing with a client and you, because of experience, something is not going to work and they still want to do it. You try to talk them out of it or just have them fail and then move to the next thing?
It's normally it's not the ideas that are wrong, it's how you execute that are wrong. So most of the time that's the thing. I mean, most of our clients, it's not like they don't know what they want to do. It's about, yes, if we have done probably a few things 5 different ways, so we would definitely have a perspective and an opinion. But the reality is every client also has their own context. Some are centralized decision-making in the same industry, centralized decision-making, completely decentralized decision-making. The power, it's not the technical stuff that really, by the way, any of it is different. There's not a whole lot of, most of the time they're coming to us because we understand the technical stuff aspect of it. And I normally say, what is the IP in AI for an enterprise? The IP is actually in how do I take the insights and put it in the business. That's the core IP of most AI stuff for enterprises. And that aspect is very unique. And so we would absolutely have, to answer your question, Chuck, we would absolutely have, listen, this is what we have seen work, but I just can't pretend to say this is always a best practice of kind of it is working, because at the end of the day, it is very personality based. It is very how the organization culture and structure is based. And that will determine some of these things. And some people, there's a reason some people do POC to scale. Some people do it big bang and everything, because there is a situational awareness almost that you have to kind of just think through that. And so the short answer, Chuck, is we can absolutely go and suggest to how do I maximize value in the shortest amount of time based on our learnings. But that may or may not be the right. That's why it's always a co-creation and a discussion. And a discussion of equals rather than we are the experts and you're not, because that will be pretentious.
I love it. So it sounds like what you're saying is when it comes to implementing AI correctly, it comes down to people. Yes, 100%. I mean, there is no AI project that I've seen that is not people personality driven. I mean, it always is. Thank you. Great stuff. We're going to move to our Q&A session. We have a ton of questions from the audience, and I would encourage any audience members who haven't sent a question, please feel free to send it in right now, and we will address it. Let me start with A question for what's the difference between AI and supply chain innovation and blockchain or distributed network management? I'm guessing that's a good question for Brad.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. They're very different from one another, but I think they need each other. Like peanut butter needs chocolate, but they just don't know it yet. Like Reese's hasn't been invented. So the blockchain, distributed ledgers are a brilliant idea when you're trying to allow a group of people that don't implicitly trust one another to work together. Kind of an important thing in a supply chain, but as you know, I'm sure we've all seen, the bringing to fruition the platforms to actually run those at scale are few and far between. And the reason for that is that they're architecturally extremely difficult to build and scale and secure and manage, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I say AI is the peanut butter to the blockchain chocolate, because but nobody really knows it yet because what does AI do best? But to understand patterns and to anticipate what outcomes will be based upon those patterns. And so if you're trying to build a blockchain at scale, AI can be a terrific help in actually looking for the shortest route, let's say, or the most effective means of rolling out different clusters to support scale as the blockchain evolves. So they're very different from one another, but I think that in the future we'll see them working hand in hand.
Great, thank you. This is probably for Amresh or Tom. How would you deal with non-stationary data, especially if you want to make decisions based on time series like reinforcement learning?
Tom, you want to do that, or you want me to take it?
Go ahead.
Right. Listen, I mean, this is a data science question for sure. How will you take care of the non-stationary data for time series one? Listen, let me just answer from a little bit on the technical side of it, and then from a business perspective of it. I think that the biggest challenge is how do you kind of convert, understand the drivers of the business, right? Understanding the drivers of the forecast and have a conversation starting from there, right? And then like what Tom said, it's not about understanding the stars is the relative difference of stars, or it's 2 minutes on the website, like the time on website in one versus it could be on one mobile phone on the other. And once you start understanding the main drivers of it, then you translate, how do I actually capture those drivers in terms of a series of variables, and some of them would be point variables, and where do I get that data? Some of them would be time series data, some of them will not be time series data. And then start understanding in terms of layering in the math of, okay, you will never get perfect data to solve the exact answer that you're saying is, but is it in the realm of possibility and within the proxy limits that you want to kind of do that? And then you start understanding, okay, is my math, all the techniques that I'm using to kind of treat the data, break the model or not? I think that is how I would, one, approach the problem to drive business value. And then along the way, there is obviously the math aspect of it that will come in so that you would treat the right kind of statistical elements in the right way along the journey. I just want to kind of just lay out kind of, because too often when we start a question completely from a technical perspective, we miss the boat on the broader vision of what we are trying to drive. And then I would just kind of back into it, then start from it. That would be my only way of thinking.
Okay. Brad, anything you want to add to that, or Tom?
Oh, yeah. Great point, Amresh. And you can't miss the forest for the trees here, because everyone might say to you, yeah, are you doing Kafka? If you're not doing Kafka, you're not doing data science. If you're not using streaming data real time to influence your models. And quite frankly, for many outcomes, statistical reasoning doesn't need be a real-time data, because it doesn't make enough of a difference to justify the investment in the hardware and cost of ingress egress for the data to actually make that tiny sliver of a precision point, in your favor. You can definitely do things static, depending on the use case.
While we're on that subject, here's another question. Is there any AI technology to support in data cleansing, curation, et cetera? How accurate are those technologies nowadays?
Yeah, I can answer that if you guys don't mind. There's been an industry for the last 30 years dedicated to data integration and data management that are populated by some extremely good companies with a lot of tech behind them that are trying to solve that very problem and trying to do so in the context of data science. So there's actually quite a bit that's out there to help with that. Basic things like trying to validate fields, trying to map one field to another, as we were talking about earlier with metadata and data catalogs. But solving things like how should I impute data? Meaning, if I have missing data, how should I go about doing that it doesn't influence the outcome of my ML model at the end of the day? That's a decision that you're not going to get from a data integration vendor. They're just trying to get data into the lake or the warehouse in a way that you can make use of it in data science. It's still a lot that's down to the data scientist. And as I mentioned, with ideas or tech like AutoML, it's expanding its scope quite a bit to look at some of those problems, like how should I impute my data to work with this specific algorithm? That's brilliant. And so I think there's a lot that's going to come there.
Great. Here's one for you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to one of Brad's point, which is I think there is a core piece of AI into the data technologies that I think is kind of has evolved a fair bit, right? And I would say they can do the math part very well, right? I think the next stage is where the industry context part or the domain context part. I think how do you treat a supply chain data versus how do you treat a finance data? How do you treat a regulatory data? I think those things are also coming, right? I think there's some emerging vendors and kind of folks who are thinking about that. But that still won't say the company context data of why it matters to you will never change. So I think we are making progress from math to probably industry and domain specific levels. But then the last mile of the human judgment of a company specific level will always be there.
Great point. Brad, this is for you. Could you show us a use case of your Jupyter notebook?
I'm just importing data right now. I wish we could show you guys, but just ask anyone on your staff that's been working in this, and they'll have plenty to show you. If you're looking for a good understanding of how EDA, exploratory data analysis works, which is what we're talking about with data prep and ideas like imputation. Just go to a community site like Kaggle, Kaggle, which is Google's site for data scientists, where they get together and try to win fabulous prizes. And you'll see on there, an incredible, knowledge base about how you should go about working with data and curated and non-curated data sets in particular, because part of Kaggle is people sharing data and putting it to use and solving those prize money problems and just in understanding world events like the pandemic.
Great. Here's one. I'm not sure who this is for. I'll toss it out here. I'd like to know how much digital maturity, master data, transaction data, accuracy, integration level of core systems, for example, ERP, is recommendable before starting discussing AI and SCM. Is that your wheelhouse, Brad?
Yeah, I guess in general, I could just throw out the idea that while I'm definitely a convert to the idea of that continuous intelligence that I was talking about, where you have visibility across the enterprise, you shouldn't wait to achieve that to work with AI. because there are gains to be made, even with small amounts of data. We've seen companies like Salesforce with their Einstein platform over the last couple of years try to help customers put AI to work without having a lot of data, without having access to external data even. So I know we're talking about external data a lot, but I just don't want people to think that you should avoid AI if you don't have true visibility across your enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, the way, Chuck, the way we kind of talk to our clients about this is thinking about a bimodal approach and design to value, right? The benefit of starting with the use case and POCs in a small area, even if you haven't figured out your master data and everything, is that you can actually, you can prove the value quickly, and you would know, by the way, which data is more important to master and get the right versus the other data, right? So there's a huge value in just that. Because if you want to clean all the data and before you start it, the reality is you will retire before you kind of get to that AI piece of it ever. And so the flip side of it is, so you have to kind of go and do that. But you also realize that sooner or later, or in parallel, you have to build the foundation, because the true potential and the value you're not going to achieve if you don't do that. So how do you actually get that bimodal approach going with a very value-based lens? That is critical. It's not either or, it's both, but with the lens of value.
Love it. Before we get to our questioning here, I've got one more little survey I'd like the audience to take a look at and do it. It's only going to take you about 30 seconds or so. So if everyone could just answer these questions, we would greatly appreciate it. And then we're going to get to more questions and answers here. We've still got a lot of questions coming in, by the way. This is really good. And we will get as many of these answered as potentially possible. So if we've all done the survey. Yes, I'm guessing everyone has done the survey. Got a last question for all of you. What are some tips that you would give for organizations based on everything that you've learned? I mean, Bose, you've been doing amazing stuff. Brad, you're totally deep into the whole ecosystem of this. Amresh, you're dealing with clients all over the place. Each of you give us a tip. Amresh?
I'll just repeat what I just said. It's a journey. Start small, but don't lose sight of the big prize.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, grow it like a bonsai plant, right? I would say, as Chuck noted.
Love it. Brad?
Yeah, I would say invest in a culture of data. That's where all of this starts, and where your ultimate value is going to come. Make it a part of your business. Make it a part of everybody that's at your business's business.
And Bill?
From my recommendation is set your expectations appropriately. Don't go for shoot for the stars all in one giant step. Take your time to learn one step at a time.
Tom, Brad, Amresh, Bill, thank you so much for all of your insights. I know this has been very valuable for the attendees, and thank you all for joining us. And that is the end of our seminar. Thank you.